Thutmose III was the sixth pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. During the first 22 years of Thutmose's reign he was co-regent with his stepmother and aunt, Hatshepsut, who was named the pharaoh. While he was shown first on surviving monuments, both were assigned the usual royal names and insignia and neither is given any obvious seniority over the other. He served as the head of her armies. After her death and his later rise to pharaoh of the kingdom, he created the largest empire Egypt had ever seen. No fewer than 17 campaigns were conducted, and he conquered from Nubia in North Syria to the Fourth Cataract of the Nile and Nubia. Officially, Thutmose III ruled Egypt for almost 54 years, and his reign is usually dated from April 24, 1479 BC to March 11, 1425 BC. However, this includes the 22 years he was co-regent to Hatshepsut. During the final 2 years of his reign, he appointed his son and successor, Amenhotep II, as his junior co-regent. His firstborn son and heir to the throne, Amenemhat, predeceased Thutmose III. When Thutmose III died, he was buried in the Valley of the Kings as were the rest of the kings from this period in Egypt. Family: Thutmose III was the son of Thutmose II by a secondary wife, Isit. His father's great royal wife was Queen Hatshepsut. Her daughter Nefer was Thutmose's half-sister. When Thutmose II died, Thutmose III was too young to rule, so Hatshepsut became his regent, soon his co-regent, and shortly thereafter, she declared herself to be the pharaoh while never denying kinship to young Thutmose III. Thutmose III had little power over the empire while Hatshepsut exercised the formal titulary of kingship. Her rule was quite prosperous and marked by great advancements. When he reached a suitable age and demonstrated the capability, she appointed him to head her armies. Thutmose III had several wives, such as she may have been the mother of his firstborn son, Amenemhat. An alternative theory is that the boy was the son of Nefer. Amenemhat predeceased his father. Merita Hatshepsut. Thutmose's successor, the crown prince and future king Amenhotep II, was the son of Merita Hatshepsut. Additional children include Menkaupet and daughters named Nebuchadnezzar, Mritamen, and Isit. Merita Hatshepsut was the daughter of the divine adoratress Hu. Nebtu, she is depicted on a pillar in Thutmose III's tomb. Menwi, Merti, Menet, 3 foreign wives. Nefer, Thutmose III may have married his half-sister, but there is no conclusive evidence for this marriage. It has been suggested that Nefer may have been the mother of Amenemhat instead of Satir. Dates and length of reign: Thutmose III reigned from 1479 BC to 1425 BC according to the low chronology of ancient Egypt. This has been the conventional Egyptian chronology in academic circles since the 1960s, though in some circles the older dates 1504 BC to 1450 BC are preferred from the high chronology of Egypt. These dates, just as all the dates of the 18th dynasty, are open to dispute because of uncertainty about the circumstances surrounding the recording of a heliacal rise of Sothis in the reign of Amenhotep I. A papyrus from Amenhotep I's reign records this astronomical observation which, theoretically, could be used to perfectly correlate the Egyptian chronology with the modern calendar. However, to do this the latitude where the observation was taken must also be known. This document has no note of the place of observation, but it can safely be assumed that it was taken in either a delta city such as Memphis or Heliopolis, or in Thebes. These two latitudes give dates 20 years apart, the high and low chronologies, respectively. The length of Thutmose III's reign is known to the day thanks to information found in the tomb of the military commander Amnembmar. Amnembmar records Thutmose III's death to his master's 54th regnal year, on the 30th day of the third month of Peret. The day of Thutmose III's accession is known to be Ishemu Day 4, and astronomical observations can be used to establish the exact dates of the beginning and end of the king's reign from April 24, 1479 BC to March 11, 1425 BC respectively. Thutmose's military campaigns. Widely considered a military genius by historians, Thutmose III made 16 raids in 20 years. He was an active expansionist ruler, sometimes called Egypt's greatest conqueror or the Napoleon of Egypt. He is recorded to have captured 350 cities during his rule and conquered much of the Near East from the Euphrates to Nubia during 17 known military campaigns. He was the first pharaoh after Thutmose I to cross the Euphrates, doing so during his campaign against Mitanni. His campaign records were transcribed onto the walls of the Temple of Amun at Karnak, and are now transcribed into Urkundun IV. He is consistently regarded as one of the greatest of Egypt's warrior pharaohs, who transformed Egypt into an international superpower by creating an empire that stretched from southern Syria through to Canaan and Nubia. In most of his campaigns his enemies were defeated town by town, until being beaten into submission. The preferred tactic was to subdue a much weaker city or state one at a time, resulting in surrender of each fraction until complete domination was achieved. Much is known about Thutmose the warrior, not only because of his military achievements, but also because of his royal scribe and army commander, Thanyuni, who wrote about his conquests and reign. The prime reason why Thutmose was able to conquer such a large number of lands, is because of the revolution and improvement in army weapons. When the Hyksos invaded and took over Egypt with more advanced weapons such as horse-drawn chariots, the people of Egypt learned to use these weapons. He encountered only little resistance from neighboring kingdoms, allowing him to expand his realm of influence easily. His army also had carried boats on dry land. These campaigns are inscribed on the inner wall of the great chamber housing the Holy of Holies at the Karnak Temple of Amun. These inscriptions give the most detailed and accurate account of any Egyptian king. First campaign When Hatshepsut died on the 10th day of the 6th month of Thutmose III's 21st year according to information from a single stela from Armanti the king of Kadesh advanced his army to Megiddo. Thutmose III mustered his own army and departed Egypt, passing through the border fortress of Teru on the 25th day of the 8th month. Thutmose marched his troops through the coastal plain as far as Jamnia, then inland to Yeum, a small city near Megiddo, which he reached in the middle of the 9th month of the same year. The ensuing Battle of Megiddo probably was the largest battle in any of Thutmose's 17 campaigns. A ridge of mountains jutting inland from Mount Carmel stood between Thutmose and Megiddo, and he had 3 potential routes to take. The northern route and the southern route, both of which went around the mountain, were judged by his council of war to be the safest, but Thutmose, in an act of great bravery, accused the council of cowardice and took a dangerous route through the Aruna mountain pass which he alleged was only wide enough for the army to pass horse after horse and man after man. Despite the laudatory nature of Thutmose's annals, such a pass does indeed exist, and taking it was a brilliant strategic move, since when his army emerged from the pass they were situated on the plain of Esdelen, directly between the rear of the Canaanite forces and Megiddo itself. For some reason, the Canaanite forces did not attack him as his army emerged, and his army routed them decisively. The size of the two forces is difficult to determine, but if, as Redford suggests, the amount of time it took to move the army through the pass may be used to determine the size of the Egyptian force, and if the number of sheep and goats captured may be used to determine the size of the Canaanite force, then both armies were around 10,000 men. However, most scholars do believe that the Egyptian army was more numerous. According to Thutmose III's Hall of Annals in the Temple of Amun at Karnak, the battle occurred on year 23, Ishemu, day 21, the exact day of the feast of the new moon a lunar date. This date corresponds to May 9, 1457 BC based on Thutmose III's accession in 1479 BC. After victory in battle, however, his troops stopped to plunder the enemy and the enemy was able to escape into Megiddo. Thutmose was forced to besiege the city instead, but he finally succeeded in conquering it after a siege of 7 or 8 months. This campaign drastically changed the political situation in the ancient Near East. By taking Megiddo, Thutmose gained control of all of northern Canaan, and the Syrian princes were obligated to send tribute and their own sons as hostages to Egypt. Beyond the Euphrates, the Assyrian, Babylonian, and Hittite kings all gave Thutmose gifts, which he alleged to be tribute, when he recorded it on the walls of Karnak. The only noticeable absence is Mitanni, which would bear the brunt of the following Egyptian campaigns into Asia. Tours of Canaan and Syria. Thutmose's second, third, and fourth campaigns appear to have been nothing more than tours of Syria and Canaan to collect tribute. Traditionally, the material directly after the text of the first campaign has been considered to be the second campaign. This text records tribute from the area which the Egyptians called Reapnu, and it was also at this time that Assyria paid a second tribute to Thutmose III. However, it is probable that these texts come from Thutmose's 40th year or later, and thus have nothing to do with the second campaign at all. If so, then so far, no records of this campaign have been found at all. This survey is dated to Thutmose's 25th year. No record remains of Thutmose's fourth campaign whatsoever, but at some point in time a fort was built in Lower Lebanon and timber was cut for construction of a processional barge, and this probably fits best during this time frame. Conquest of Syria equals, the 5th, 6th, and 7th campaigns of Thutmose III were directed against the Phoenician cities in Syria and against Kadesh and the Orontes. In Thutmose's 29th year, he began his 5th campaign where he first took an unknown city which had been garrisoned by Tunip. He then moved inland and took the city and territory around Ardata. The town was pillaged and the wheat fields burnt. Unlike previous plundering raids, however, Thutmose III subsequently garrisoned the area known as Jai, which is probably a reference to southern Syria. This subsequently permitted him to ship supplies and troops between Syria and Egypt. Although there is no direct evidence for it, it is for this reason that some have supposed that Thutmose's 6th campaign, in his 30th year, commenced with the naval transportation of troops directly into Byblos, bypassing Canaan entirely. After the troops arrived in Syria by whatever means, he proceeded into the Jordan River Valley and moved north from there, pillaging Kadesh's lands. Turning west again, Thutmose took Saumura and quelled a rebellion in Ardata, which apparently had rebelled once again. To stop such rebellions, Thutmose began taking hostages from the cities in Syria. The cities in Syria were not guided by the popular sentiment of the people so much as they were by the small number of nobles who were aligned to Mitanni, a king, and a small number of foreign Marianu. Thutmose III found that by taking family members of these key people to Egypt as hostages, he could drastically increase their loyalty to him. However, Syria did rebel yet again in Thutmose's 31st year, and he returned to Syria for his 7th campaign, took the port city of Al-Isa and the smaller Phoenician ports, and took even more measures to prevent further rebellions. All the excess grain which was produced in Syria was stored in the harbors he had recently conquered, and was used for the support of the military and civilian Egyptian presence ruling Syria. This furthermore left the cities in Syria desperately impoverished, and with their economies in ruins, they had no means of funding a rebellion. Attack on Mitanni after Thutmose III had taken control of the Syrian cities, the obvious target for his 8th campaign was the state of Mitanni, a Hurrian country with an Indo-Aryan ruling class. However, to reach Mitanni, he had to cross the Euphrates River. Therefore, Thutmose III enacted the following strategy. He sailed directly to Byblos and then made boats which he took with him overland on what appeared to otherwise be just another tour of Syria, and he proceeded with the usual raiding and pillaging as he moved north through the lands he had already taken. However, here he continued north through the territory belonging to the still unconquered cities of Aleppo and Carchemish, and then quickly crossed the Euphrates in his boats, taking the Mitannian king entirely by surprise. It appears that Mitanni was not expecting an invasion, so they had no army of any kind ready to defend against Thutmose, although their ships on the Euphrates did try to defend against the Egyptian crossing. Thutmose III then went freely from city to city and pillaged them while the nobles hid in caves. During this period of no opposition, Thutmose put up a second stele commemorating his crossing of the Euphrates, next to the one his grandfather Thutmose had put up several decades earlier. Eventually a militia was raised to fight the invaders, but it fared very poorly. Thutmose III then returned to Syria by way of Nile, where he records that he engaged in an elephant hunt. He then collected tribute from foreign powers and returned to Egypt in victory. Tours of Syria Thutmose III returned to Syria for his 9th campaign in his 34th year, but this appears to have been just a raid of the area called Nukash, a region populated by semi-nomadic people. The plunder recorded is minimal, so it was probably just a minor raid. Records from his 10th campaign indicate much more fighting, however. By Thutmose's 35th year, the king of Mitanni had raised a large army and engaged the Egyptians around Aleppo. As usual for any Egyptian king, Thutmose boasted a total crushing victory, but this statement is suspect. Specifically, it is doubted that Thutmose accomplished any great victory here due to the very small amount of plunder taken. Specifically, Thutmose's annals at Karnak indicate he only took a total of 10 prisoners of war. He may simply have fought the Mitannians to a stalemate, yet he did receive tribute from the Hittites after that campaign, which seems to indicate the outcome of the battle was in Thutmose's favor. The details about his next two campaigns are unknown. His 11th is presumed to have happened in his 36th regnal year, and his 12th is presumed to have happened in his 37th, since his 13th is mentioned at Karnak as happening in his 38th regnal year. Part of the tribute list for his 12th campaign remains immediately before his 13th begins, and the contents recorded might indicate that it took place on the steppe around New Kashash, but this remains mere speculation. In his 13th campaign Thutmose returned to New Kashash for a very minor campaign. The next year, his 39th year, he mounted his 14th campaign against the Shasu. The location of this campaign is impossible to determine definitely, since the Shasu were nomads who could have lived anywhere from Lebanon to the Transjordan, to Edom. After this point, the numbers given by Thutmose's scribes to his campaigns all fall in lacunae, so campaigns can only be counted by date. In his 40th year, tribute was collected from foreign powers, but it is unknown if this was considered a campaign. Only the tribute list remains from Thutmose's next campaign in the annals, and nothing may be deduced about it, except that it probably was another raid to the frontiers around Nile. His final Asian campaign is better documented, however. Sometime before Thutmose's 42nd year, Mitanni apparently began spreading revolt among all the major cities in Syria. Thutmose moved his troops by land up the coastal road and put down rebellions in the Arka plain and moved on Tunip. After taking Tunip, his attention turned to Kadesh again. He engaged and destroyed 3 surrounding Mitannian garrisons and returned to Egypt in victory. However, his victory in this final campaign was neither complete, nor permanent, since he did not take Kadesh, and Tunip could not have remained aligned to him for very long, certainly not beyond his own death. Nubian campaign Thutmose took one last campaign in his 50th regnal year, very late in his life. He attacked Nubia, but only went so far as the Fourth Cataract of the Nile. Although no king of Egypt had ever penetrated so far as he did with an army, previous kings' campaigns had spread Egyptian culture that far already, and the earliest Egyptian document found at Jebel Barkal, in fact, comes from 3 years before Thutmose's campaign. Monumental construction. Thutmose III was a great builder pharaoh and constructed over 50 temples, although some of these are now lost and only mentioned in written records. He also commissioned the building of many tombs for nobles, which were made with greater craftsmanship than ever before. His reign was also a period of great stylistic changes in the sculpture, paintings, and reliefs associated with construction, much of it beginning during the reign of Hatshepsut. Artistic developments Thutmose's architects and artisans showed great continuity with the formal style of previous kings, but several developments set him apart from his predecessors. Although he followed the traditional relief styles for most of his reign, after his 42nd year, he began having himself depicted wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt and an angstromdite kilt, an unprecedented style. Architecturally, his use of pillars also was unprecedented. He built Egypt's only known set of heraldic pillars, 2 large columns standing alone instead of being part of a set supporting the roof. His Jubilee Hall was also revolutionary, and is arguably the earliest known building created in the basilica style. Thutmose's artisans achieved new heights of skill in painting, and tombs from his reign were the earliest to be entirely painted, instead of painted reliefs. Finally, although not directly pertaining to his monuments, it appears that Thutmose's artisans had learned glass-making skills, developed in the early 18th dynasty, to create drinking vessels by the core-formed method. Karnak Thutmose dedicated far more attention to Karnak than any other site. In the Eighteenth, the temple proper in the center, he rebuilt the hypostyle hall of his grandfather Thutmose I, dismantled the Red Chapel of Hatshepsut, built Pylon 6, a shrine for the bark of Amun in its place, and built an ante-chamber in front of it, the ceiling of which was supported by his heraldic pillars. He built a temenos wall around the central chapel containing smaller chapels, along with workshops and storerooms. East of the main sanctuary, he built a Jubilee Hall in which to celebrate his said festival. The main hall was built in basilica style, with rows of pillars supporting the ceiling on each side of the aisle. The central two rows were higher than the others to create windows where the ceiling was split. Two of the smaller rooms in this temple contain the reliefs of the survey of the plants and animals of Canaan which he took in his third campaign. East of the Eighteenth, he erected another temple to Aten where he was depicted as being supported by Amun. It was inside this temple that Thutmose planned on erecting his Tekenwati, or unique obelisk. The Tekenwati was designed to stand alone, instead as part of a pair, and is the tallest obelisk ever successfully cut. It was not, however, erected until Thutmose IV raised it, 35 years later. It was later moved to Rome by Emperor Constantius II and is now known as the Lateran obelisk. Another Christian Roman Emperor Theodosius I re-erected another obelisk from the Temple of Karnak in the Hippodrome of Constantinople, in AD 390, and is now known as the Obelisk of Theodosius. Thus, two obelisks of Thutmose III's Karnak Temple stand in Papal Rome and in Caesarea-Papist Constantinople, the two main historical capitals of the Roman Empire. Thutmose also undertook building projects to the south of the main temple, between the sanctuary of Amun and the Temple of Mut. Immediately to the south of the main temple, he built the seventh pylon on the north-south road which entered the temple between the fourth and fifth pylons. It was built for use during his jubilee, and was covered with scenes of defeated enemies. He set royal colossi on both sides of the pylon, and put two more obelisks on the south face in front of the gateway. The eastern one's base remains in place, but the western one was transported to Hippodrome in Constantinople. Further south, along the road, he put up Pylon 8 which Hatshepsut had begun. East of the road, he dug a sacred lake of 250 by 400 feet, and then placed another alabaster bark shrine near it. He commissioned royal artists to depict his extensive collections of fauna and flora in the botanical garden of Thutmose III. Tomb Thutmose's tomb was discovered by Victor Lauret in 1898, in the Valley of the Kings. It uses a plan which is typical of 18th Dynasty tombs, with a sharp turn at the vestibule preceding the burial chamber. Two stairways and two corridors provide access to the vestibule which is preceded by a quadrangular shaft, or well. A complete version of Amduat, an important New Kingdom funerary text, is in the vestibule, making it the first tomb where Egyptologists found the complete text. The burial chamber, which is supported by two pillars, is oval-shaped and its ceiling decorated with stars, symbolizing the cave of the deity Soka. In the middle lies a large red quartzite sarcophagus in the shape of a cartouche. On the two pillars in the middle of the chamber there are passages from the Litanies of Re, a text that celebrates the later sun deity, who is identified with the pharaoh at this time. On the other pillar is a unique image depicting Thutmose III being suckled by the goddess Isis in the guise of the tree. The wall decorations are executed in a simple, diagrammatic way, imitating the manner of the cursive script one might expect to see on a funerary papyrus rather than the more typically lavish wall decorations seen on most other royal tomb walls. The coloring is similarly muted, executed in simple black figures accompanied by text on a cream background with highlights in red and pink. The decorations depict the pharaoh aiding the deities in defeating Apep, the serpent of chaos, thereby helping to ensure the daily rebirth of the sun as well as the pharaoh's own resurrection. Defacing of Hatshepsut's monuments. Until recently, a general theory has been that after the death of her husband Thutmose II, Hatshepsut usurped the throne from Thutmose III. Although Thutmose III was a co-regent during this time, Early historians have speculated that Thutmose III never forgave his stepmother for denying him access to the throne for the first 2 decades of his reign. However, in recent times this theory has been revised after questions arose as to why Hatshepsut would have allowed a resentful heir to control armies, which it is known she did. This view is supported further by the fact that no strong evidence has been found to show Thutmose III sought to claim the throne. He kept Hatshepsut's religious and administrative leaders. Added to this is the fact that the monuments of Hatshepsut were not damaged until at least 20 years after her death in the late reign of Thutmose III, when he was quite elderly and in another co-regency with his son who would become Amenhotep II, who is known to have attempted to identify her works as his own. Additionally, Thutmose III's mortuary temple was built directly next to Hatshepsut's, an act that would have been unlikely to occur if Thutmose III bore a grudge against Hatshepsut. After her death, many of Hatshepsut's monuments and depictions were subsequently defaced or destroyed, including those in her famous mortuary temple complex at Dur el-Bahari. Traditionally, these have been interpreted by early modern scholars to be evidence of acts of damnatio memoriae by Thutmose III. However, recent research by scholars such as Charles Nims and Peter Dorman has re-examined these erasures and found that the acts of erasure which could be dated, only began sometime during year 46 or 47 of Thutmose's reign. Another often overlooked fact is that Hatshepsut was not the only one who received this treatment. The monuments of her chief steward Senenmut, who was closely associated with her rule, were similarly defaced where they were found. All of this evidence cast serious doubt upon the popular theory that Thutmose III ordered the destruction in a fit of vengeful rage shortly after his accession. Currently, the purposeful destruction of the memory of Hatshepsut is seen as a measure designed to ensure a smooth succession for the son of Thutmose III, the future Amenhotep II, as opposed to any of the surviving relatives of Hatshepsut who had an equal, or better, claim to the throne. It also may be likely that this measure could not have been taken earlier until the passing of powerful religious and administrative officials who had served under both Hatshepsut and Thutmose III had occurred. Later, Amenhotep II even claimed that he had built the items he defaced. Death and burial. According to the American Egyptologist, Peter de Manuelian, a statement in the tomb biography of an official named Amenemp establishes that Thutmose III died on year 54, 3 Peret day 30 of his reign after ruling Egypt for 53 years, 10 months, and 26 days. Thutmose III, hence, died just 1 month and 4 days shy of the start of his 54th regnal year. When the co-regencies with Hatshepsut and Amenhotep II were deducted, he ruled alone as pharaoh for just over 30 of those years. Mummy Thutmose III's mummy was discovered in the Dur el-Bahari cache above the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut in 1881. He was interred along with those of other 18th and 19th dynasty leaders Thutmose I, Amenhotep I, Thutmose I, Thutmose II, Ramesses I, Seti I, Ramesses II, and Ramesses IX, as well as the 21st dynasty pharaohs Pinagem I, Pinagem II, and Siamun. While it is popularly thought that his mummy originally was unwrapped by Gaston Maspero in 1886, it was in fact first unwrapped by a Permel Milbrug, the Egyptologist who supervised the evacuation of the mummies from the Dur el-Bahari cache 5 years previously in 1881, soon after its arrival in the Boulak Museum. This was while Maspero was away in France, and the Director General of the Egyptian Antiquities Service ordered the mummy re-wrapped. So when it was officially unwrapped by Maspero in 1886, he almost certainly knew it was in relatively poor condition. The mummy had been damaged extensively in antiquity by tomb robbers, and its wrappings subsequently cut into and torn by the Rachel family who had rediscovered the tomb and its contents only a few years before. Maspero's description of the body provides an idea as to the magnitude of the damage done to the body. His mummy was not securely hidden away, for towards the close of the 20th dynasty it was torn out of the coffin by robbers, who stripped it and rifled it of the jewels with which it was covered, injuring it in their haste to carry away the spoil. It was subsequently reinterred, and has remained undisturbed until the present day. But before reburial some renovation of the wrappings was necessary, and as portions of the body had become loose, the restorers, in order to give the mummy the necessary firmness, compressed it between 4 oar-shaped slips of wood, painted white, and placed 3 inside the wrappings and 1 outside, under the bands which confine the winding sheet. Of the face, which was undamaged, Maspero says the following: "Happily the face, which had been plastered over with pitch at the time of embalming, did not suffer at all from this rough treatment, and appeared intact when the protecting mask was removed. Its appearance does not answer to our ideal of the conqueror. His statues, though not representing him as a type of manly beauty, yet give him refined, intelligent features, but a comparison with the mummy shows that the artists have idealized their model. The forehead is abnormally low, the eyes deeply sunk, the jaw heavy, the lips thick, and the cheekbones extremely prominent. The whole recalling the physiognomy of Thutmose II, though with a greater show of energy." Maspero was so disheartened at the state of the mummy, and the prospect that all of the other mummies were similarly damaged, that he would not unwrap another for several years. Unlike many other examples from the Dur el-Bahari cache, the wooden mummiform coffin that contained the body was original to the pharaoh, though any gilding or decoration it might have had been hacked off in antiquity. In his examination of the mummy, the anatomist Grafton Elliott Smith stated the height of Thutmose III's mummy to be 1.615 m. This has led people to believe that Thutmose was a short man, but Smith measured the height of a body whose feet were absent, so he was undoubtedly taller than the figure given by Smith. The mummy of Thutmose III now resides in the Royal Mummies Hall of the Cairo Museum, catalogue number 61068. See also, Cleopatra's Needles, History of Ancient Egypt, 18th Dynasty of Egypt Family Tree. References. Further reading: Eloise Jarvis McGraw, Mara, Daughter of the Nile, Redford, Donald B., The Wars in Syria and Palestine of Thutmose III, Culture and History of the Ancient Near East 16, Leiden, Brill, 2003. ISBN 90-04-12989-8, treats the military annals of Thutmose III, with regard to his conquests in the Levant. Der Manuelian, Peter, Studies in the Reign of Amenophis II, Hildesheimer Egyptologische Beiträge G.E., Harby, Verlag, 1987, Klein, Eric H. and O'Connor, David, Thutmose III, A New Biography, University of Michigan Press, 2006. ISBN 0-472-11467-0, incorporates a number of important new survey articles regarding the reign of Thutmose III, including administration, art, religion and foreign affairs. Rasinger, Magnus, Entwicklung der Occurrenz Ägyptischen K. Nix Plastik in der Fra 1/4 Hen und Hohen 18. Dynasty, Agnes Verlag, Ma 1/4 NSTEO 2005, ISBN 3-00-015864-2, Breasted, James Henry. Ancient Records of Egypt, Volume 2, The 18th Dynasty, University of Illinois Press, 2001. ISBN 0-252-06974-9 Rivagod by Smith, Wilbur. Along with the rest of his Egyptian series of historical fiction novels are based in a large part on Thutmose III's time along with his story and that of his mother through the eyes of his mother's vizier, mixing in elements of the Hyksos domination and eventual overthrow. External links: A Short History of Ancient Egypt Dynasties 18 to 20, with a few Thutmoside documents translated. Hatshepsut, From Queen to Pharaoh, an exhibition catalogue from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which contains material on Thutmose III, Thutmose III page of our karaoke at the Wayback Machine.